was born in Vienna, in Austria, and in 1924, which may seem centuries ago to you, and for the first 14 years of my life, lived a perfectly normal, happy-go-lucky schoolboy life. I don't know, are you all around 10?
Yeah. 10, 11.
Yeah. So at that age, I was in Austria. The schooling system is a little different. That everybody goes to the school nearest to their home. The Nazis, there were a number of Nazis in Austria. They were prohibited from having a party in public, but privately. One knew they existed. And they tried to assassinate, to shoot the Austrian Chancellor, which is the equivalent to the Prime Minister. And that happened in 1934, just when I was your age. The country was divided. I think there were many secret admirers of Hitler. There were many Austrians who actually wanted him to come in. And that we didn't know really, but they were there.
And what about in your family?
My father was Jewish, my mother was Catholic. We were, I'd say, I didn't think anything special about that. That's just the way it was. There were just rumors going around that something was brewing. And then one fine day, the then Austrian Chancellor, a man called Schuschnigg, was summoned by Hitler, and he told him that within 3 days he would invade Austria, and Austria could either surrender or it would be a shooting war. And they decided to surrender.
At what point did you realise that you had to get out of Vienna and Austria?
Well, right after the German army had moved in, Hitler had this personal private army, the SS. You may have heard of them or seen pictures of them in black uniforms with the swastika armband. And they immediately took over the Austrian police, and then there was another branch of the Nazi, if you like, structure. They had the people, the so-called brown shirts, which was their own private army. They wore brown uniforms, also with a band, but separate from the SS. And they were mostly made up of people who had been unemployed in Germany and had been recruited, and they got paid. But they started beating up people in the street, beating up the Jews, any Jews they could find. They dragged people from their homes. Neighbors said, he's a Jew, I know that, and so on. People who went to synagogues were recognized. And the horrifying thing is when that sort of thing happens, is when the police, who are supposed to protect you, and if they're there and they see, they turn around and walk away.
So when did you pack your bags, and what happened?
Well, two things happened. My father's, all the Jewish businesses were taken away from their owners, and somebody else was put in charge. In our case, my father had a small company making ski clothes, ski jackets and ski trousers. And the man who was put in charge of his business was an employee of the company who was probably quite a decent character, and he didn't know he could run the company. So although my father no longer owned it, he was allowed to run it. But he himself was so intimidated, he tried to commit suicide. And he was in hospital for 2 days unconscious, but somehow he came round. And I realized then that there was no life for any of us, because if the situation was so terrible that he could not see himself living through it, it was too awful to even think about it. And then just by chance, my mother found out that there was a thing called a Kindertransport being organized. Now, most of the countries around Austria, most of the countries in the world, didn't want to take refugees. It was a bit like now with the asylum seekers. Most countries more or less closed their doors. There were enormous queues of people wanting to get out around every embassy, every consulate, and it was a little trickle of people got out. Sometimes it was sheer luck. Somebody found out that if you took a train ticket through Russia to Shanghai, people in the authorities in Shanghai would let you in. Others managed to have, who had relatives living abroad, who would guarantee for them, they managed to get out. But the majority of the Jewish population of Vienna, which was quite large by comparison, didn't make it, couldn't get out. But somebody in Holland and in Britain got together and persuaded the two governments to allow 10,000 children to come. They had to be under the age of, I think, 16, and no parents were allowed, only the children. And I had one day my mother said, "Do you want to go to England?" I said, "Yes," without even thinking about it. How? And she explained to me about the Kindertransport. And I had about, I think, 5 days before I was ready to go. And they had organized trains. Some of the people who were very active in doing this organizing were people called the Quakers. I don't know whether you've heard of the Quakers. They're a religious group called the Society of Friends. And they have not been given much credit for this, but they were there and they had to take the children through the police barriers, and in some cases they rode on the trains because no parent was allowed on the train. And my train was left at midnight from a suburban station. And that was so that people around shouldn't really see what was going on. So late at night, my mother took me to the station. And, all we were allowed is one suitcase and a little hand case with overnight things. And again, I was lucky I was already 14, because some of the children that were on that train were as young as 3. And they were very often with an older brother or sister. And in one or two cases, the mother just turned to somebody and said, "Will you please look after my little boy or my little girl?" So I think I was very lucky I was already 14 and I could look after myself to a certain extent.
Have you ever reunited with your parents, or?
Yes, my parents were very fortunate. My father managed to get out to Sweden, and my mother could follow him, and they lived in Sweden right through the war. But I didn't see them for 7 years. I didn't see them. I was 14. I saw them again when I was 21.